Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Proline. I'm John Creighton in Las Vegas, joined by Jeff Sod, who's been running Las Vegas Sports Services for 14 years. We're going to take a look at the Big 12 2014 college football preview. Got all the teams in the conference to take a look at and how they're going to fare on the gridiron, both straight up and against the number, as well as some totals. But first, make sure you check out Jim Feist's Early Bird Special for NFL football fans. What you'll get is August, the entire 4 weeks of preseason, including his game of the year in preseason, all for $29 at 1-866-841-1655. And Jeff, they can get aboard an August special from you as well.
You get the entire preseason, the entire month of August, which is the entire preseason, for only $19. It's call every test 1-866-575-8916. Last year I had 5 plays rated 20 stars or better. 4 of them won. And this is the best time to do it because the prices get higher as we go along. This is the best time to sign up for the preseason. $19, LVSS, 1-866-575-8916.
All right, we're going to start with the Big 12. You know, last year, 2013, it was a 4-team race. You had Baylor at 8-1 in the conference. Then you had Texas at 7-2 with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma had the Big 12's top recruiting class this off season, and the Big 12 has made 7 title game appearances in the BCS era, with Oklahoma and Texas each claiming championships. One problem, though, is that no Big 12 team has reached the title game in each of the last 4 seasons. So, Jeff, we might as well start with Oklahoma, which the odds makers say is one of the top teams in the country. How does Bob Stoops' team look for 2014?
Well, they look like they could be national champion contenders. They returned 7 on offense, 9 on defense last year, 11-2, 8-5 against the spread. Other than the BCS championship team, other than the BCS game teams last year, Florida State and Auburn, nobody finished more impressively than the Sooners. Last year they were underdogs the last 3 games at Kansas State, at Oklahoma State, and then a 17-point dog versus Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. They won all 3 outright. Sophomore quarterback Trevor Knight is a starter. He improved as the season went on last year, culminating with that big win against Alabama. Sophomore quarterback Baker Mayfield was 9 for 9 for 125 yards in the spring game, but he'll still be the backup this season. Summer calling freshman running back Joe Mixon, the next Adrian Peterson. We'll have to wait and see on that one. 4 offensive linemen are back. The big loss on defense was cornerback Aaron Colvin, the safety Gabe Lynn, but just about everyone else is back. They opened against Louisiana Tech at home, then they go at Tulsa, in Tennessee at home. The toughest conference games are at home. The Kansas State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and plus they have the game in Dallas versus Texas. I think they're in the running for the national championship. 11-1, 12-0. As you said, the top recruiting class in the Big 12. Everything looks good for Oklahoma right now, John.
Okay, I'm going to take a look at Texas. And here's a team that was 8-5 last year, but they have a new coach this year in Charlie Strong. They were 8-5 under the total. And Strong is a defensive mastermind, and what he's talked about is instilling a very tough mindset here in Austin since he arrived back in January. So we're going to see a physical team, probably an improved defense because of that. Now, the offense that he has 5 starters returning, and it was a pretty good offense last year, although it was one-dimensional. They averaged 29.3 points per game, 79th in the country in passing, just over 212 per game, but it was the running game that was really good, a run-oriented team, 196.2 yards rushing per game. That was 36th in the country. And the quarterback situation is actually pretty deep. You got senior quarterback David Ash back. Now, he had 7 touchdowns and 2 picks, 760 yards. He missed 10 games last year because of concussion-like symptoms, but when he played 2 years ago as a sophomore, he was very good, 19 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Plus, they have a 6'4" sophomore in Tyron Swoops. He only had 26 yards passing, but does know the playbook. And you've got Max Wittick, if you remember him from USC. He transferred from the Trojans. So they do have some talent as long as they can stay healthy at quarterback. Meanwhile, the backfield is absolutely loaded for the Longhorns. Junior running back Jonathan Gray. This guy's had over 700 yards rushing in each of the last 2 years. 4.9 yards per carry last year. Senior running back Malcolm Brown is back. He had 904 yards last year. Joe Bergeron. So you got the top 3 running backs back. The only concern is they do lose 3 offensive linemen. They also have a very good wide receiver in Jackson Shipley with 589 yards. It's been more of a short passing game. Now, Strong's strength is defense. They were decent last year, 25.8 points per game. However, they had some games where they were really awful, and that's something to keep in mind. They do have senior Cedric Reed, defensive end, coming back. He's 6'6", had 9 sacks last year. Actually thought about going to the NFL draft, but decided to come back. So that's a nice plus. And they have a new defensive coordinator in Vance Bedford. So overall, there's some very good talent at linebacker and a lot of returning experience in the secondary, led by cornerback Quandra Diggs. But keep in mind, last year's defense, they had some meltdowns. They gave up 40 points to BYU, 44 to Ole Miss, 40 to West Virginia, 38 to Oklahoma State. So overall numbers were decent, but they had some very serious meltdowns. And the Texas has been really great against the spread at home the last 9 seasons. 88-29 straight up, 62-53 and 1 against the spread. So they're probably in for a winning season with this new coach based on all the talent and balance they had. All right, Jeff, how about the Baylor Bears? I know Art Briles loves to recruit to speed for that offense.
Yeah, last year 11-2 straight up, 9-3 against the spread. The Baylor was 8-4-1 to the over last year, even though the posted totals on the games averaged 72 points. They just can't make those totals high enough for this team. The quarterback, Bryce Petty, is back. 32 TDs last year, 3 interceptions, 4,200 yards, 62% completion rate. They lose Lake Seastrunk at running back, and freshman Shaq Linwood is supposed to be the leading candidate. But in the spring game, Johnny Jefferson looked better, or looked pretty good in the spring game. Linwood didn't play in that game. Corey Coleman had 5 catches of 47 yards, and he's just one of a great wide receiver core there, including Antoine Goodley, who had 71 receptions last year. There's 2 of their offensive line starters, including guard Cyril Richardson, who was the Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year. The defense allowed just 23.5 points per game last year. That was the best defense in many, many years, but the defense loses 7 starters. The secondary is going to be a big concern. Baylor had a soft non-conference schedule last year, and this year they play Northwestern State at home and then at Buffalo. They open a home versus SMU. They play at Texas, at Oklahoma, at West Virginia. They get TCU, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State at home. With that schedule and the losing a lot on defense, they could pull out a 9-3 season, maybe 8-4, John.
Okay, I'm going to take a look at the Oklahoma State Cowboys team off a 10-3 season for Mike Gundy, 8-5 against the spread. You got 6 starters back on offense, 7 on defense. Mike Gundy loves that no-huddle offense, and they were great, averaging 39 points per game. That was 15th in the nation. Pretty good balance, 172 yards passing, but 276.8 yards rushing per game. That was 29th in the country. And quarterback situation is pretty good. Junior quarterback J.W. Walsh returns 9 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, over 1,300 yards passing. And they also have freshman Mason Rudolph, who's stepping in and going to learn the playbook. But there's plenty of weapons for the quarterback situation. Senior running back Desmond Rowland, 811 yards, 4.6 yards per carry, along with 3 offensive linemen. Loaded at wide receiver with depth and returning talent. 6'2" sophomore wide receiver Joa John Seals, 571 yards. You got 6'4" sophomore Marcel Aitman. 5'7" junior Dave Glidden in the slot, and junior Brandon Shepard. So a lot of the significant pieces from last year's wide receiver core is back. Also have another guy who's a track star in Tariq Hill, who they've used him at times in the slot, and they're not sure whether they're going to use him as a running back or a wide receiver. But Gundy likes him and is determined to try and get this kid a few carries this year, so keep an eye on him. May surprise you to know that the defense for the Cowboys was great last season, despite the no-huddle. They gave up 21.6 points per game. That was 19th in the nation. That helps explain a 7-5-1 under the total for them last year. However, defense looks like it's going to take a step back for this year. The defensive line lost some key players. They do have James Castleman up front, and they might be able to get to the passer with a couple of good defensive ends in Jim Bean and San Wren, but there are questions at linebacker and with the secondary, so they probably won't be as good. And the schedule for Oklahoma State, not quite as good this year. First of all, they're going to open against Florida State, the defending champs. That game will be in Arlington, Texas. And then they got really difficult road tests at TCU, Kansas State, at Baylor, and at Oklahoma. So, boy, hitting that 10 wins again is going to be difficult. If you're looking for a revenge game, you want to circle October 25th on your Oklahoma State scorecard, because they were a 19-point favorite against West Virginia last year, lost the game 30-21. Also, keep in mind the Cowboys played 5 of their final 7 games on the road. So I think defense is going to take a step back. Might be a good team to look at over the total this season. Oklahoma State is unlike last year. All right, Jeff, Bill Snyder is absolutely amazing, one of the best coaches in the country. What does he have in store for Kansas State this fall?
Yeah, last year was supposed to be kind of a rebuilding year, but Snyder, being the great coach that he is, still managed 8 wins. All 5 losses were by 10 points or fewer. Last year they were 8-5 against the spread, 8-5 straight up. This year they have 6 offense players returning, 5 on defense. Jake Waters, the starting quarterback, 18 TDs last season, 9 interceptions, 61% completion rate. He split time with Daniel Sams, who after the season thought maybe might want to become a wide receiver, but that didn't work out either. So now Sams is gone. So Jake Waters is now the definite starting quarterback for the Wildcats. Top receiver. In the spring game, the offense did not look good at all, but so they were concerned about that. But their top receiver, Tyler Lockett, didn't play in that game due to an injury. The offensive line loses 3 starters, and the backfield is a big question mark this year. Defense is solid, including Ryan Muller, who was the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year. The big game on the non-conference schedule is Auburn, September 18th. The Wildcats have only been home underdogs once in the last couple of years. I think they were 17-point dogs to Baylor last year, lost by 10. There'll probably be a couple point underdogs versus Auburn. But then they have tough road schedule at Iowa State, at Oklahoma, TCU, West Virginia, Baylor. All those are road games. They get Texas, Oklahoma at home. Never underestimate Bill Snyder, but with that schedule though, I'll call for an 8-4 season for Kansas State.
Okay, a team that would be happy with an 8-4 season would be TCU. Coach Gary Patterson, 6-12 since joining the Big 12. They're off a bad season of 4-8 straight up, 4-8 against the spread, 2-7 in the Big 12. And as a result, some changes have been made. He brings in Doug Meacham to coach the TCU offense. He was offensive coordinator at Houston, and we know what they did, run and gun, and he's going to share the offensive coordinator duties with Sonny Cumbie, who also loves to throw the football. He was a quarterback coach at Texas Tech. So you got to expect a more up-tempo attack, or at least try to go more up-tempo for TCU this fall. You know, they scored 25 points per game, which isn't that bad, but some of the offensive numbers were very poor. 226.3 yards passing. That ranked 72nd in the nation. And the ground game was awful, 110th in the nation with 118.6 yards rushing per game. So you can see why he's bringing in some of these new coaches. Unfortunately, the quarterback situation, boy, they had 3 quarterbacks last year that combined for 13 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. You got junior quarterback Trevor Boykin is back. He had 7 TDs, 7 picks last year. Sophomore quarterback Tyler Matthews, he's in the mix, along with a redshirt freshman Zach Allen. So I know they're going to try and throw the ball more, but there are certainly question marks. They do have a good running back, though, in junior running back B.J. Catalan, 569 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. So despite their ground struggles last year, he was very good. And they also have a big wide receiver in Josh Doxson, 440 yards, but he's a 6'4" junior. And they have a senior wide receiver in Dave Porter returning, and he averaged 16.7 yards per catch. So the skill positions are very good for the offense. They should take a positive step. And even if they don't, this defense at TCU was simply tremendous last year and should be again. They were a top 25 team defensively in yards allowed. Gave up 25.3 points per game, which was only 54, but they were very good all around. And the front 6 returns largely intact with 8 overall starters. Plus, the front 6 doesn't include Devontae Fields. This guy was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year back in 2012 as a true freshman. But he only played in 3 games last year because of injuries. So the defensive line is loaded for TCU, and the secondary will be in very good shape, led by senior strong safety Sam Carter and senior cornerback Kevin White. So a lot to like about this defense, the unique 4-2-5 defensive scheme. I think TCU is going to be tremendous. And maybe a team to look at under the total with the question marks on offense and certainly a fantastic defense, which they were last year, 6-5-1 under the total. Finally, keep in mind, TCU at home has a tremendous home mark, 36-7 straight up, 24-19 ATS run the last few seasons. All right, one of the teams, Jeff, that isn't familiar with going under the total is Texas Tech. How do they shape up?
Well, this is going to be a typical Texas Tech team, great on offense and defense is shaky. They last year 8-5, 6-7 against the spread. They returned 8 on offense, 5 on defense. They won their first 7 last year. Then the schedule got tougher. They lost the next 5. But then they ended the season with a convincing win over Arizona State in the Holiday Bowl, and they hope to build off that this year. Davis Webb is the quarterback, 20 TDs, 9 interceptions. Completed 63% of his passes last year. In the spring game, he threw for 354 yards. He loses 2 of his top targets, though, wide receiver Eric Ward and tight end Jason Morrow. But they still have junior Jakeem Grant and seniors Bradley Marquez and Jordan Davis. So still looks good there on offense. Kenny Williams, who led the team in rushing the last 2 years, is also returns. Defense forced only 19 turnovers last year, and they're going to be rebuilding this year, especially on the line and the secondary, so that's going to be the biggest problem. They open up with Central Arkansas and UTEP before hosting Arkansas. The conference road games at Oklahoma State, Kansas State, TCU, and Iowa State. They get Texas, Oklahoma, and Baylor at home. With the defense being the biggest concern, especially in this conference where teams can rack up 40, 50 points a week, they're going to be, I think the Red Raiders will be hard-pressed to go 6-6 to get a bowl game, John.
Okay, Iowa State is another team that was in a bowl game 2 years ago, but fell off, so they're in bounce-back mode. Everything went wrong for Paul Rhodes' crew last year. Injuries and a lack of depth. They finished 3-9 straight up, 2-7 in the Big 12, 6-7 against the spread, and with a bad defense, they were 8-5 over the total. But remember, 2 years ago, they did make a bowl, so they've overachieved overall for Rhodes. Last year's offense, well, for this year, he's got 8 starters back on offense. And the offense wasn't that bad last year, 24.8 points per game. But as far as production, they were 219 yards passing, 143.8 yards rushing. Rhodes is a run-oriented guy, so they averaged almost 150 yards rushing, but finished 88th in the nation. And oddly enough, the offensive stats were very similar to their 2012 season when they made it to a bowl. But still, they're hoping for better health this year. And Paul Rhodes brings in a new offensive coordinator in Mark Mangino. He's coming to try and open up the Cyclone attack a little bit more. One of the pluses on offense is the junior quarterback, Sam Richardson. He was very good as a freshman and even good last year when he played, 11 TDs and 6 picks. But he took such a beating. He got banged up. He's a terrific running quarterback. He had 342 yards rushing last year before going on the shelf much of the second half of the season. And that forced the freshman quarterback, Grant Rohawk, to get in. And he's a sophomore now and was decent. 8 touchdowns, 7 picks, over 1,200 yards. So they got plenty of experience and depth returning at quarterback. And while they love to run the football, you've got the Cyclones have more career starts on the offensive line, 86, than anybody in the Big 12. So it's a very good offensive line and a terrific backfield. You got running back senior Aaron Wimbley. He had 4 yards per carry, 567 yards. Junior running back Devondrick Neely is back. He's also a very good pass catcher out of the backfield. And the wide receivers are loaded with Bundridge, West, and Ekby. And Bundridge is actually a good big play threat with 676 yards. That was third in the Big 12 last year, as well as 9 touchdowns. The defense, though, suffered from injuries and a lack of depth, giving up 36 points per game, 110th in the country. And they do have concerns as they lose their top 2 tacklers. The defensive line is a little bit thin, and so is the secondary. So the offense looks better, but the defense still looks like a major problem. And some of those numbers that stood out last year, they lost 48-10 to Oklahoma. They couldn't stop West Virginia they did beat West Virginia, but gave up 44 points, 52-44. And then the Kansas State game, Kansas State ran all over them, 41-7. And so did Baylor in a 58-27. So it's a pretty good team to look at over the total. The schedule, they do get Kansas State at home in week 2. That's September 6th. And then that big rivalry game against Iowa on September 13th. And, of course, a revenge game is October 18th against Texas. That was a game where they really outplayed and should have beat Texas, but ended up losing on a bad call late in the game. And it was a game with Paul Rhodes, a nationally televised game where he just blasted the officials and had a bit of a meltdown. So I'm sure this team is going to have that October 18th game circled at Texas as a revenge game. All right, Jeff, what about the West Virginia Mountaineers? They are also off a losing season.
Yeah, they'll probably have another one this year, too. It doesn't look good right now, West Virginia. Last year they were 4-8, 3-9 against the spread. They returned 6 on offense, 7 on defense. Coach Dana Horgerson is in a tough spot here. They're 11-14 in the last 2 seasons. They've lost 16 out of the last 20 games. And he's trying to compete in the Big 12, which is a much tougher conference than it was in the Big East where they used to be. Now he has to deal with a totally unsettled quarterback situation. They have at least 5 candidates for quarterback. Paul Millard and Clint Trickett started the games last year, but walk-on senior Logan Moore was the star of the spring game. They're loaded at running back, though. Damian Smith, 4.8 yards per carry. Plus, they're going to get Pitt transfer Rusho Shell. He'll come on board. He rushed for 641 yards for the Panthers in 2012. They returned 3 offensive linemen, plus the top receiver, Dakio Shorts. He's back. The defense is going to be a big problem, especially in this conference. Linebacking looks solid, but the line and secondary are major question marks. The defensive coordinator, Keith Patterson, left for Arizona State. Tony Gibson, who coached the safeties last year, takes over there. They face FCS team Towson, but then the other two non-conference games are against Alabama and Maryland, and I don't see many wins in the conference either, John. I think it's going to be another 4-8 season like last year.
I don't see many wins for Kansas either. Charlie Weiss is still here, but he's only got 3 starters back on offense, 8 on defense. They went 3-9 straight up, 1-8 in the Big 12 last year, 4-8 against the spread, and they went 7-4-1 under the total because of no offense. They averaged 15.3 points per game, 140 yards passing, 154 yards rushing. Couldn't do anything. So he brings in John Regan to run the offensive coordinator. He ran Rice's offense last season, but they really don't have any playmakers. They had 3 quarterbacks last year that combined for 9 touchdowns and 12 picks. And the good news is 2 of those guys are back. Senior quarterback Jake Heaps, he had 8 touchdowns and 10 picks, just over 1,400 yards. And then the sophomore quarterback Montel Cosred, he had no touchdowns and 2 picks. And if you're looking for a surprise, it might be T.J. Millward. He comes to Kansas from UCLA, a transfer from the Bruins. Running back situation is actually pretty deep with junior Darian Miller, 4.8 yards per carry. He's the lone one good gun back there. And Tony Pearson and Brandon Bourbon are also seniors. They're capable options, but again, this team struggled so badly with the passing game that teams could key up on the run. And then the defense, I mean, they had 8 guys back, and they largely return intact for defensive coordinator Dave Campbell, but they gave up 31.8 points per game. That was 94th in the nation, and it was worse in Big 12 play where they ranked 8th in total defense, and they gave up 37.2 points per game in Big 12 play. So if you're an optimist, the returning talent could help the defense, but overall, boy, this team has struggled badly, and the schedule is no help for Kansas at all. It's really brutal. They got some road games at Duke in week 2, at West Virginia, at Texas Tech, at Baylor, at Oklahoma, at Kansas State. So really, when you combine all of that, I think the chances for Kansas's winning season can be summed up in 2 words: impossible. Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone, on ProLine. We're going to see you next week. Make sure you check out JimFeist.com for more college football previews. We got free stats, picks, and videos, as well as Jim's personal fast facts right from his database. Just go into the tools section at JimFeist.com and check it out. That and more at JimFeist.com. We'll see you next week with another edition of ProLine, and make sure you check out more college football previews for 2014.